Hi, my name is David Severn and I'm a social documentary photographer based here in Nottingham. I'm interested in people and place, specifically the way in which people use the land and how environment can affect and shape communities. Within that context, I'm particularly interested in working class culture and the places that are associated with it both historically and today. So in the next 18 minutes, I'm going to be speaking to you a little bit about a body of work, a project that I've recently started, looking at the travelling showman community in Britain. So travelling showmen are people that run fairgrounds. And they're a fascinating bunch of people to me for lots of different reasons. But firstly, because I have this fascination with the connection between people and place. And of course, the travelling showmen have travelled extensively across Britain all their lives. So they have this vast wealth of knowledge of the landscape and geography of our country. And they've also experienced lots of different cultural quirks that are unique to all the various local areas of our land. So they have a lot of stories to tell, and that it makes them very interesting people. But secondly, I'm interested in them as a community in themselves, because they're a very closed-off community and quite clannish in the way that they stick to their own. They have very robust traditionalist family values, and they're very quite, kind of secretive about their lifestyle, really. So I was drawn to that kind of, the difficulty in accessing them. And so this is just to tee off, and I'm just going to start narrating the photographs as I go along. This is the first image in the series, and it was taken on the first day that I started photographing the Goose Fair in Nottingham. And it was while the fair was being set up, and I was just pacing the site, trying to figure out, what was going to be where and who was who. And whilst I was doing that, I stumbled across this group of people who were collecting conkers on the lane, the avenue that stretches across the top of the Forest Recreation Ground where the Goose Fair is held. And I didn't know it at the time, but this actually turned out to be quite an interesting social image, because these three children in the background are showman children, whereas the family in the foreground here are non-showmen. And that's interesting because showman children don't very often get to mix outside of their own community. There's a lot of stigma in the public realm and a lot of misconceptions surrounding travelling showmen. And I think people sort of sometimes think that they just kind of rock up and put their rides down and don't pay any ground rent or any tax and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of sort of tension between showmen and non-showmen, and as such, the kids don't get to interact outside of their own community. I didn't know that at the time, and so when I met these children later on that week and photographed them in their trailers, I was really pleased that I got this shot. But I also like the image because they're doing this kind of really primitive thing, and that they're collecting conkers and, gathering natural resources, which people have done for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's a very kind of, and they also have these primitive tools as well. This guy in the middle here with a stick that he's going to use to whack the conkers down from the trees, and the younger boy in the background, he's got this larger stick that he's going to use to launch up into the tree and sort of smash down as many conkers as he possibly can, which he's quite obviously succeeded in doing, as the pavement's littered with them. So this very primitive thing, but then you've got all these contemporary visual markers. So the next hoodie. And the cooperative plastic bag that this kid's using to collect all his conkers in. And, just what they're wearing, the tracksuit top and trainers, and even, the modern fairgrounds in the background. So this interesting kind of juxtaposition. This is one of the first family portraits that I took of the showman family. And so this is Jade, Michael, and Sharon. And Michael and Sharon are Jade's grandparents. And this is Michael and Sharon's permanent home. They live in a trailer. It's quite a big trailer. This is just their living room. And as you can see, they have this quite large sofa in there. So it's quite a large space. And they take, the showmen take a lot of pride in where they live and spend a lot of time decorating and personalizing their spaces. And, they keep their spaces immaculately clean as well. All the trailers that I visited were really, really beautifully presented, and there was an incredible sense of pride about where they live. So Jade is pictured here wearing her party dress. This is ahead of the Showman's Children's Party that they have every year at Goose Fair. And they do that because often throughout the year, the showman families are traveling to different parts of the country, and often the fairs are quite small ordeals. So, of course, the children don't get to see their friends very often, and they miss each other. But when they come to Goose Fair, it's one of the biggest fairs in the UK, and in fact, one of the biggest fairs in Europe. So a hell of a lot of the showman community are here in Nottingham. So they do this really lovely thing, and they rent out a room, a hotel suite in town, and they come into the city centre, and they have a party for all the kids, which is really great. And I actually went along, but there's no pictures in this sequence, but, you know, it's really great for them to sort of just run around and play and do what kids do. And I wanted to picture Jade in this way, with her grandparents looking on sort of quite proudly at her, because when I interviewed Michael and Sharon, they were really proud of her academic achievements. A lot of the showman children don't have access to a mainstream school, and so it's difficult for them to access education. I met a lot of kids, you know, some 10, 11, 12 years old, and they couldn't read or write, which is really sad. But actually, Jade is part of a distance learning program, and she's been following it really well. And she's been excelling in her maths and English, which her grandparents were really proud of. And I think, you know, that this image kind of encapsulates that sense of pride that her grandparents have of her. So this is Michael and Sharon on their own, and they've been married for 35 years. There's not a lot of divorce within the showman community. They're not necessarily religious people, but they just have this, you know, very traditional family values. And they also don't tend to marry outside of the business as well. It's quite rare that you find somebody that's married in to the showman lifestyle. And at this point, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Showman's Guild, which is a sort of trade representative body that all showmen are a part of. And instead of trying to describe it in my own words, I've got some notes that have fallen on the floor. And I've taken a passage directly from the Showman's Guild website that says it much better than I can. So, the principal object of the Showman's Guild has remained the same since its inception as the Van Dweller Association, to protect the interests of its members, travelling showmen who gain their livelihoods by attending fun fairs. It does this in two ways: by its code of rules for members and through the legal and constitutional processes of the land. The Guild's rule book ensures that all members have equal status within the Guild, regardless of the scope of their operations as individual businessmen. The rules, which are enforced by the Guild's own disciplinary tribunals, cover such matters as the orderly running of fairs and the conduct of members both on and off fairgrounds. So not only are they a sort of marginalised and quite, you know, segregated sector of society, they also sort of have this, you know, their own society within a society, really. They have their own tribunals, their own kind of legal system, and a set of rules that they abide by incredibly stringently. This is John and his son, also called John. There's a bit of a theme in showman families that they name their sons after their fathers. They take their father's name. So a lot of the males have the same name from generation to generation. But I just want to focus for a second on the two teenagers in the background here. So the girl on the right-hand side is her daughter, John Senior's daughter. And the teenage boy sat next to her is her boyfriend. And I spent some time with them talking a little bit about how relationships work and how you sort of go about finding love as a young showman, because I thought that might be quite a tricky thing for them. And they were saying that actually there isn't a great, you know, a dating culture in the showman community at all. You know, if you find somebody that you are romantically attracted to, and there's a mutual attraction, and you spend a lot of time with them and get to know them, then 9 times out of 10, that's the person that you'll settle down with and marry and spend the rest of your life with. So again, very traditionalist family values that they stick very strictly to. And when I was talking to John, I interviewed John as well, and he was saying to me that as a younger showman, he used to socialise sometimes in a club in Yorkshire when he went up to do a fair there. And he used to speak to some non-showmen that were in this club, and he was good friends with them, and and they were friends with him as well. But he would be quite amused by the fact that they were in disbelief that he even owned, so much as a television or had permanent, fixed radiators in his trailer. So maybe sort of opinion and the idea has changed in modern times, but certainly 20, 30 years ago, there was just no kind of knowledge about how these people lived at all, and it was often imagined that they lived in very ramshackle conditions, when in fact, as you can see, the images demonstrate a very recognizable nuclear family, really, and something that we can all, or most of us can relate to. So this is John again with his two sons. They're all called John. Everybody in that picture is John. It was a nightmare. I spent some time with them, with John and John, younger John and John, on the trailer park, and they'd been playing that afternoon on the trailer park. And what struck me when I was watching these kids run around playing is the incredible sense of freedom that they have on this park. So they're running around, in the lanes that separate each of these trailers, and everybody knows each other on this site. So the kids can run in and out of different trailers and grab a juice from, Mrs. Smith's trailer or whatever, and run out again. And there's no anxiety about. Because I imagine these lanes to be the equivalent of these kids' street, really. It's their community. And it kind of reminded me, well, not reminded me, obviously I wasn't there, but of what post-war East End of London might have been like, this focus on community in the street. And that was a really lovely thing to see. And, although these families travel across the country, it's quite amazing that when they pitch up on a trailer site, they bring all their ideals and their culture with them and sort of play it out temporarily on that site. That's another thing that kind of interested me when I was photographing them. So this is Larry, Cherie, and guess what the kid's called? Yeah, Larry Jr. Well, how I was saying that it's very rare that you come across people that have married into the business. Well, I found someone, and this is Cherie in the middle here. She was born a flatty or a joskin, which is what the term that showmen use to refer to people that have been born in a non-showman community and live in a traditional, bricks and mortar house or a flat. I guess that's where the term flatty comes from. And joskin is a northern term, I think. So I spoke to her a little bit about that, and I said to her, you must have kind of gone through quite an extreme culture shock when you married Larry and you, joined the showman community. And she said, well, actually, it was different kind of all of a sudden being on the road and going to lots of different places. But Cherie was born in the East End of London, and her father was a barrow boy. So she already knew, this very close-knit community and, had that sense of street community culture that I was talking about on the previous image. And so she was saying that, actually it wasn't all that different, and she married into it and merged very well with the community. But I don't think that it's like that for others. It can be, well, I imagine it can be incredibly difficult for people marrying into this kind of way of life. So this is a view of the Goose Fair from Larry and Cherie's trailer. Actually, I'll just flick back a second. The kid, Larry, he was having none of it. And he wouldn't let me photograph him, basically, so I had to take the picture with him just looking out the window. He was playing Temple Run on the iPhone, and he wasn't very good at Temple Run anyway, so no. So I took this picture while I was waiting for Larry Jr. to try and calm down. This is just quite an amusing picture. I think this is obviously when the fair was up and running, and there's lots of photographs that I've not included in this slideshow that because of time constraints, of course, but I included this one because as I was walking around the fair, and I spent 4 or 5 days there, literally from like 10 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, when it was, just getting a bit too hostile, and had to leave. But this woman was sat on on a stall, filing her nails all the time, and while her husband attended the punters on the shoot the can stall. And so I was surprised that she had any nails left by the end of the week. And I'm just going to end on this image. This is two sisters plaiting their brother's hair and obviously causing him a lot of excruciating pain. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. All right.